Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail. When I first walked into the Cadenza Marketing Group office, it felt like I had stepped into another universe, where everything was a little too bright and everyone was smiling a little too hard. The lobby was flooded with sunlight, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and softened by expensive gauze curtains that probably had their own Instagram account. Next to the elevator was a glass water fountain that made a continuous gurgling sound, as if the building itself was trying to whisper, "We are calm, we are collected, we are expensive." And I believed it. God, I wanted to believe it so badly. I had graduated from university 3 months earlier, with honors, with a double major in English and media strategy. And this was my first real job, full-time, an entry-level copywriter at a small agency in the city center that everyone on LinkedIn described as revolutionary and dynamic, which basically meant low pay and a heavy workload, but I didn't care. I was finally doing what I wanted to do. A career. My badge was fresh. My folder smelled of toner and ambition, and the desk I was shown, smooth, white, without a single knick-knack, seemed to be waiting just for me. I sat down with a tremor in my chest and a smile I couldn't hide. Everything felt like the beginning, until it stopped being one. It all started with small things, as it usually does in an office. The strange silence when I entered the room, the lingering glances of my colleagues, the note on the fridge that read, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." But no one ever laughed. The fake aesthetics of beanbag chairs and kombucha taps couldn't hide the tension simmering beneath the surface, like a burnt-out fuse. Mia was the first person who really spoke to me. She was a senior editor in her 30s, and her every gesture was precise. Her hair was always perfectly styled in a bun, despite the humidity. She wore dark lipstick like it was armor, and when she walked, people moved out of her way. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a polite smile. "I'll check everything you write before it goes to the client," she said, not harshly, but not warmly either. "Don't worry, everyone suffers a little in the first few months." I laughed nervously. She didn't. Then there was Jordan, our creative strategist, although no one really knew what that meant. He wore sneakers that glowed in the dark and had an altar of half-dead succulents on his desk. His motto, he said, was, "Break the rules, but deliver on time." He joked on the line between charming and exhausting, but he was the only one who made the place a little less sterile. Charlotte was an enigma. She sat by the window, closest to the only real plant in the office, a ficus named Terry, according to the sticker. Charlotte had such tunnel vision that when she worked, the world around her disappeared. Headphones on her ears, her fingers flew over the keyboard. She rarely spoke unless she had to, but when she did, she chose her words carefully, thoughtfully. Once, I watched her rewrite a product description 12 times until it was perfect. No one asked her to. That was Charlotte. And then he showed up. Daniel started working 2 weeks after me, and suddenly, the ground beneath the office seemed to shake. Our new creative director. He walked in like he was expecting applause. Tall, sophisticated, smelling expensive. He wore designer shoes without socks and had a smug smile that seemed permanently etched on his face. Everything about him said, "I'm the smartest person in this room." And maybe that was true, but the way he used it seemed more like a scalpel than a gift. At the first meeting, he stood at the head of a long glass table, hands in his pockets, and announced, "We're going to cut the fat. Too many layers, too much fluff. We're storytellers, not novelists." Pause. Then he added, "Frankly, I don't need expensive copywriters to write advertising slogans. Any school kid with a decent imagination can do that." The room fell silent. Mia froze. Jordan clenched his jaw. Charlotte didn't even blink. And me? I felt something cold spread down my spine. I was new. I was still smiling, still trying. So I laughed. Too quickly, too easily. "Mistake," Daniel noticed. He looked at me as if I were a piece of furniture that had spoken. "You're new, Abby?" "Abigail," I corrected without thinking. He raised an eyebrow. "Cute. Keep it short, Abigail. No one reads anymore. Then he walked away, as if he was bored with the whole thing. That night, I stayed late to finish my presentation. The office was dark, except for the blue light of the computer screens and the hum of the servers. I watched Mia, who was sitting across the room, rubbing her temples as she edited something for a luxury soap brand. I wondered if she ever laughed here. I wondered if I ever would. "Don't take it to heart," Jordan said, coming over to me with a stale cookie in his hand. "Daniel is the kind of guy who says he loves feedback, but only if it's printed on his Yale resume." I managed a half smile. Jordan sat down on the edge of my desk and whispered, "Want to hear a secret?" I nodded. This place eats optimism for breakfast. I laughed, but too quietly. He wasn't joking. By the third week, Daniel had cut the number of freelancers in half, started testing texts written by unpaid interns, and openly mocked a document with branding recommendations at a team meeting because it used the word narrative. "We don't tell stories," he said. "We sell products. Anyone who forgets that is dead weight." That same day, he sent a memo to all employees titled the Fresh Voices Initiative. It detailed a plan to open up content creation opportunities to non-traditional authors, which translated to teenagers on TikTok, essayists on Reddit, and unpaid brand ambassadors. Mia barely moved her lips throughout the meeting. Jordan muttered, "Oh, God!" Charlotte didn't say a word, but her hands were shaking as she typed. "And me?" I sat still and smiled when he looked at me. I nodded when he asked if I was excited to mentor new voices. I said, "Sure, it'll be interesting to see." Because I was beginning to understand what had been haunting me in this place with its bare walls. This job wasn't about talent. It was about survival. And people like Daniel? They didn't want genius. They wanted obedience. I watched him walk away, notebook in hand, head held high, like a man who had just revolutionized an industry by firing half his team. And I thought, "You're going to regret this. Not today, but soon." The word he used was optimization, not cuts, not layoffs, not restructuring. "Team optimization," Daniel said, with the casual detachment of someone adjusting a playlist, not people's livelihoods. It was a Monday morning meeting, 9:05 a.m., and the war room felt too small for the energy inside it. We were packed in, Mia with her arms crossed, Jordan uncharacteristically quiet, Charlotte sitting ramrod straight beside the dry erase board. I stood near the back, notebook in hand, pretending I belonged. Daniel didn't stand, he prowled, back and forth in front of the whiteboard like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. "Here's the truth," he said. "Too many people, not enough value. We've got layers where we need speed, redundancy where we need innovation. Half this team is writing emails like it's 2012. I felt the blood drain from my face. "And copywriters." He paused for effect, smiling as if letting us in on some cosmic joke. "Listen, I don't need a team of 10 people to write buy now in 30 different fonts. That's not strategy, that's busy work." Mia's jaw clenched so tightly I heard her teeth grind. He clicked the cap of the whiteboard marker like a metronome, but he never used it. We're in a new content age. People want raw, authentic, fast. They don't care about perfect syntax. They care about relatability. And let's be honest, any schoolchild with a decent sense of humor and TikTok can write a call to action these days. There it was. That was the moment it shifted. You could feel the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. I looked at Charlotte. Her expression hadn't changed, but her fingers were twitching in her lap. Jordan leaned forward slightly in his seat, like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or throw something. "Starting this week," Daniel continued, "we're running a trial. New voices, student voices, young writers, digital natives, no training wheels, no old habits." Jordan raised a hand, more out of sarcasm than curiosity. "And these student writers are, where exactly? Some sort of agency partnership?" Daniel grinned. "Direct outreach. My niece runs a writing club online. Found some fresh talent. Unfiltered. Untainted." I blinked. I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. Charlotte spoke up, her voice cool but razor sharp. So we're replacing experienced staff with unpaid teenagers? Interns, Daniel corrected. Think of it like a lab, and you'll be overseeing them, guiding, mentoring. The meeting ended 10 minutes later, but no one really left the room. We just kind of drifted out into the open office, quieter than usual, like we'd all been told the building had termites, and maybe, just maybe, it would collapse soon. That afternoon, an email pinged. Subject, test writers, workflow shifts. Attached were 3 names I didn't recognize. The file formats were a mess. The content? Worse. A product description for a luxury handbag read, "Your friends will be jelly when you roll up with this drip." Jordan swiveled around in his chair, holding up a printout. "Tell me this is a joke." Mia didn't look up. "It's not." They replaced our copy team with a bunch of emoji-happy freshmen. Charlotte stood up and walked to the kitchen without a word. When she came back, her coffee had spilled slightly over the rim of the mug, but she didn't seem to notice. She sat down and started rewriting one of the new submissions. From scratch. By Wednesday, tension bled into everything. Internal Slack threads went unanswered. Jokes died mid-sentence. The mood shifted from confusion to fear. Because no one had said the word. But we all felt it coming. Layoffs. One copywriter was let go on Thursday. A quiet email from HR. Jane has decided to pursue new opportunities. But she hadn't. Her desk was cleared by noon. Her chair was gone by 3. Friday morning, another one vanished. Then another. One by one, like teeth being pulled from a smiling mouth. Jordan started leaving early. Charlotte started staying late. Mia stopped smiling altogether. I started paying attention. To Daniel's language. To his movements. To the way he would brush past our desks and say things like, "Why do we need 6 edits for an Instagram caption?" Or, "That Gen Z kid wrote 3 headlines in 1 hour. What are we doing?" At first, it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. But this? This was a guillotine with the blade still mid-air. I had a one-on-one with Daniel scheduled for Friday afternoon. 4:45 p.m., his signature time slot for conversations that weren't really conversations. His office was sleek, sparsely decorated, modern art on the wall, books with the spines facing inward. He didn't offer a chair. I sat anyway. "I want to thank you for being flexible, Abigail," he began, like this was some kind of performance review. "You've adapted well." "Thank you," I said, although it sounded like a question. "We see you as a bridge," he continued. "Someone who can connect the old guard to the new wave. Someone who can facilitate rather than create." I froze. Facilitate? "We've got some really promising new talent," he said. "Your role will be more supervisory now. Give feedback, clean up structure, make sure the student voices feel heard." "So, I won't be writing anymore." "Oh, you'll still write," he said with a dismissive wave. "Eventually. Right now, we need leadership, not ego." I didn't respond. Because what could I say? Thank you for the demotion? For being turned into a glorified babysitter? I walked out of his office with my throat burning. By Monday, my calendar was full of meetings with junior contributors. I spent hours cleaning up garbage drafts, rewording lines that made no sense, masking amateurish content with polish I'd been told wasn't necessary, and all the while, Daniel praised their rawness. The worst part? He never looked at me again like I mattered. Just a warm body, just a buffer between the chaos he'd created and the clients who hadn't yet noticed. Until they did. But that would come later. Right now, we were still pretending, still smiling, still calling it optimization instead of what it was, dismantling. And the day I realized I wasn't being seen, not really, I also realized I wasn't staying silent much longer. Because you can only be invisible for so long before you start making noise of your own. It was a Thursday afternoon when Mia stopped by my desk and tapped gently on the edge. "He's calling people in," she said quietly. "They're calling it a reorg." My fingers stilled over the keyboard. "Who's he meeting with?" Everyone, she said, voice tight. One at a time. I nodded once. There was nothing else to say. By 3:10, 3 people had walked in. None had come back. At 3:42 p.m., Daniel's assistant pinged me. Daniel would like to see you in his office at 4 go. No explanation, just a calendar invite and the sound of an hourglass emptying. I got up, smoothed the front of my blouse, and walked to the small bathroom at the back of the office. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look scared. I looked still. It was a strange comfort, knowing the storm was coming, but having time to put on your coat. At 3:59, I walked into his office. Daniel didn't look up. He was texting. He finally glanced at me, nodded toward the chair across from him, and said, "How are you feeling?" Not hi. Not thanks for coming in. Just how are you feeling? Like I was a patient being prepped for anesthesia. I'm okay, I said calmly. He gave a theatrical sigh, like this whole thing burdened him most. So look, Abigail, you know I value your presence. Your energy's been really grounded. I waited. Let him talk. But we're pivoting. Fast. Faster than anticipated. We need content that moves, that pulses, that responds to trends in real time. He said this while clicking through some slideshow on his iPad. I didn't care what it was. I already knew. We're building a vibe-driven framework, he continued. Fast content, reactive campaigns, stuff that lives and dies in 24 hours. That's where the market is now. Agile, raw, and, well, we're restructuring some roles to make that happen. Restructuring, I repeated. He nodded, his face the picture of feigned regret. It's not personal. They always say that when it absolutely is. You've been an asset, he went on. Truly. But right now, we're exploring talent with a different rhythm. School children, I said softly, not sarcastically, just stating a fact. Daniel blinked, then laughed like I was being cheeky. I mean, not literally, though some of them do have real spark. The world's changing. We're not about polish anymore. We're about vibes. There it was. The word he'd been waiting to use. Vibes. As if a decade of craft and precision could be replaced by someone with a TikTok account and a ring light. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. I didn't touch it. This outlines the transition package, a reference if you need one. HR's in the loop. They'll deactivate your login by end of day, just protocol. I nodded. He seemed startled. You're taking this well? I am, I said. There was a long pause, like he was waiting for something, tears, begging, outrage, something to make him feel powerful. It didn't come. Instead, I stood, smoothed my blouse again, looked him in the eye. You know, I said evenly, you didn't have to dress it up. You could have just said, we don't value what you do anymore. He hesitated. That's not it. But it is. Another pause. Then, quietly, I added, and I'm not ashamed of the work I did here. He looked uncomfortable now, like I'd shown up to a costume party in real clothes. I don't regret a single word I wrote, I said, even the ones you never read. I picked up the folder. It felt weightless. Good luck with your vibes. I left, not angrily, not fast, just whole. The walk back to my desk was silent. No one looked up. Jordan was gone already. Mia's office door was closed. Charlotte stared blankly at her screen. I powered down my computer, packed my things. It didn't take long. Turns out dignity doesn't take up much space. I left the neon "Create Something Beautiful" sign glowing behind me. Outside, the sky was turning gray. It smelled like spring and ozone, like something waiting to be broken open. On the train home, I sat still, hands folded in my lap. I wasn't crying. I wasn't numb. I was into clear. They had taken something from me, but not everything. Because here's what they didn't understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Composed doesn't mean complicit. Sometimes dignity looks like holding your head up while someone tries to make you small. Sometimes power is in not flinching when they try to erase you. That night, I walked into my apartment, dropped the folder onto the kitchen counter, and made tea. Real tea. The loose leaf kind I'd been saving for a day that felt like an ending, or maybe a beginning. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. I named it After. I didn't know exactly what would go in it yet, but I knew one thing. This was no longer about surviving. It was about starting, and I would never again let someone else define what I was worth. I didn't go home right away the next morning. Instead, I wandered down 7th, coat unbuttoned in the spring chill, and ducked into a small cafe I'd passed 100 times, but never entered. It was the kind of place with dusty books on high shelves and an espresso machine that wheezed like it had survived a war. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and slid into a window seat. The cafe was quiet, half lit by soft amber sconces and one grimy skylight. Outside, the city moved indifferently, everyone walking with the kind of focus that makes you feel unmoored. I watched them for a while. Consultants with earbuds, interns with iced lattes, someone in a blazer talking too loudly on a Bluetooth call. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Daniel had given me. I opened it, then closed it again. It wasn't worth reading, because that folder didn't know who I was. And suddenly, I did. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw it clearly. My job hadn't been just writing. That's what people like Daniel never understood. To them, a sentence was a string of words, a campaign was a hashtag and a Canva template. But what we did, was deeper. We built voices, we sculpted identities, from scratch, for clients who didn't know how to describe themselves until we handed them the language to do it. I thought of the early mornings with Mia, huddled over a rough branding brief, picking apart a client's mission statement like surgeons, removing cliches, transplanting clarity, stitching tone into credibility. I remembered the analytics dashboards I built, those long nights teaching myself how to translate bounce rates into narrative adjustments, how to tweak messaging based on time on page and keyword density. I remembered the tone guides I drafted, line by line, persona by persona. We didn't just write slogans. We created characters, brands with consistent voices that smiled the same way in emails, whispered the same confidence on landing pages, laughed the same way in a YouTube ad. That wasn't fluff. That was architecture. And it was invisible, because no one notices when the scaffolding is sturdy. They only notice when it collapses. Daniel never saw it. He thought you could rip out the strategy and leave the sparkle. That fast content was just words typed quickly, slapped onto a trending visual, pushed into the void. But I knew better. Because I was the one who sat with the CEO who didn't know how to pitch their product. I was the one who rewrote an entire investor deck in one night because the original tone sounded like a robot wrote it. I was the one who made a cosmetics startup feel like a revolution and a law firm sound human. And no AI could do that. Not really. AI can mimic. It can assemble sentences. But it doesn't know what not to say. It doesn't understand subtext, or emotional nuance, or the exact pause between humor and humility that makes a reader trust you. And those school children Daniel was so enamored with? Maybe some of them had talent. But talent is raw. It's a spark, not a system. It doesn't understand the brand equity of a comma. It doesn't know that changing a single word in a subject line can increase conversions by 17%. And more importantly, why? I looked around the cafe, suddenly seeing the brands in every detail. The napkins with the embossed script, the chalkboard specials in pun-heavy font, the curated playlist humming in the background, trying to sound effortless but actually workshopped within an inch of its life. Someone had made those choices. Someone like me. Someone invisible, but necessary. I took out my laptop, opened the folder I'd created the night before. After. And I started making a list. Not of complaints, not of regrets. A list of what I built. Tone of voice guides for 12 brands. 46 campaign briefs. 10 complete brand messaging overhauls, strategy documentation that got used by sales, dev, support, and design, social copy that tripled engagement, UX content that halved user confusion, emails that made people click, headlines that made people stay. Not one of those things lived in my job description, but every one of them lived in the results. I wasn't just a writer, I was a strategist, a builder, a translator of identity. And now that I could finally see that clearly, they didn't get to take it from me. I sat back in the wooden chair, sipped my now cold coffee, and stared out the window again. This time, I didn't feel unmoored. I felt solid. Not because I had a new job lined up, I didn't. Not because I had a plan yet, I didn't. But because I knew who I was now. And once you know that, you can't be erased. I hadn't been gone a full week when I started getting texts. The first was from Jordan. Just a single sentence. He hired a 17-year-old who thinks bespoke means gluten-free. I nearly choked on my tea. The second came from Charlotte, late at night, which was unusual for her. They deleted the tone guide. The interns keep asking if our law client can sound more like Wendy's Twitter. I stared at my screen for a long time. They were unraveling it. Everything we'd built, every document, every strategy, every tiny bit of invisible structure holding that agency upright, was being tossed out like yesterday's press release. Daniel had opened the floodgates, and in poured the freelancers, teenagers, influencers, junior writers who wrote in lowercase and thought adding to a headline made it fresh. He wasn't just trying to replace professionals. He was trying to erase them. From what I heard, he stopped vetting candidates after the second week. He set up a bulk hiring pipeline through freelance platforms, ran a contest called Vibe Over Experience, and told clients they were witnessing a content revolution. Only, it wasn't a revolution. It was a regression. The new copy came in fast, and it showed. Paragraphs with no punctuation, product descriptions that sounded like gossip. A financial client's landing page used the phrase, "Stack that paper, boss babes." Jordan sent me a screenshot. This was supposed to be a retirement savings guide. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Charlotte told me they'd officially archived the entire documentation folder. That meant my work, our work, wasn't just unused. It had been discarded. I asked him why, she said over coffee one afternoon. He said it felt too structured, too legacy. Too legacy. Apparently, professionalism had become a dirty word. Documentation, hierarchy, process. All of it was now branded old think. Daniel wanted chaos he could call innovation. And he was getting it. But here's the thing about chaos. It doesn't scale. By the third week, clients were complaining. One asked why their voice had suddenly gone off-brand. Another flagged 3 typos and a missed compliance disclaimer in a single newsletter. A long-term B2B account threatened to pull if whatever Gen Z parody account you've assigned us wasn't removed immediately. But Daniel? He doubled down. He told the team that disruption always made people uncomfortable, that the clients who didn't get it would be left behind. "You don't teach a dinosaur how to TikTok," he reportedly said in a team meeting. "You build a spaceship without them." And yet, while he was out buying his metaphorical spaceship, the agency was bleeding trust. Mia finally reached out to me one night. Just a voice note. She sounded tired, diminished. They had a meeting about content metrics today. Daniel said engagement was up because people were, quote, clicking to see how bad it is. He said bad press was still attention. I think he's lost the thread. I didn't respond right away because I was busy rereading my old client notes. After I'd left, I'd started reorganizing my files. Quietly, methodically. I built a database of tone guidelines I'd written, all anonymized. I started charting what worked, what didn't, and why. I reread the email from our old legal tech client, the one who said my UX copy had reduced support tickets by 30%. I started to see it all again, not as scraps from a job I lost, but as proof of something Daniel would never understand. Professionalism isn't trendy, but it works. Trendy gets attention. But attention doesn't convert. Professionalism builds trust, and trust lasts longer than any meme. When a client signs a contract, they're not buying vibes. They're buying confidence, consistency, clarity. They're buying results. And suddenly, I realized something else. Daniel didn't just undervalue professionalism. He didn't understand it. To him, style was performative. Throw glitter on a mess and call it modern. To him, cheap meant agile. But what he'd forgotten is that cheap always comes with a cost. A reprinted campaign, a lost client, a lawsuit over a missed disclosure, a brand reputation in freefall because a TikTok freelancer thought irony was universal. Eventually, cheap becomes expensive, and when it does, the people in charge look around and say, "How did this happen?" But by then, the professionals are already gone. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Somewhere in a Slack channel I no longer had access to, there were people scrambling to fix what they'd broken. But I wasn't going back. Because I was building something better. Not flashy, not trendy, just real. Rooted in what they couldn't see. Invisible work, done right. The first complaint came from Belmore Legal. A terse email addressed to the agency's senior account manager. "We've noticed recent language in your newsletters lacks clarity, misstates service guarantees, and fails to align with our previously approved compliance language. If these errors are not corrected, we will terminate our contract immediately." Jordan forwarded it to me with a single word. Yikes! Within days, the floodgates opened. A luxury skincare brand demanded a meeting after their influencer campaign launched with a caption that read, "Wrinkle fighter so good, it should be illegal, Satcher bad girl glow." Their audience didn't find it cheeky. They found it offensive. A fintech startup spotted 4 inaccuracies in their FAQ copy, including one that violated federal disclosure requirements. The intern who wrote it had no idea what the Fair Lending Act even was. And then there was the health insurance client whose chatbot script suggested a medication might make you feel magic. That alone could have triggered a class action lawsuit. By the end of the week, 6 clients had threatened to pull contracts. But instead of course correcting, Daniel did something else. He blamed me. He didn't do it directly, not at first. It started with whispers in Slack threads and vague references in meetings. He told the team I had overcomplicated workflows and that they were now liberating the voice from my legacy structure. And then came the real punch. An internal memo leaked, meant only for directors, where Daniel laid out a damage control plan. It said, "Some of the style inconsistencies and messaging gaps can be traced to the previous content strategist's documentation, which was overly rigid and confusing for junior contributors. We are actively simplifying the system she left behind." Charlotte sent me a screenshot, followed by, "He's rewriting history now." I stared at the message for a long time, not angry, not even surprised, just tired. Because I knew what this was. This was betrayal with a smile. Daniel couldn't admit that his experiment was failing, so he twisted the truth. I hadn't complicated things. I'd clarified them. I'd built frameworks so flexible they could scale across 5 departments. I'd written guides that explained tone, structure, even pacing. I hadn't just made words, I made sense. And now, he was erasing me to protect his own fantasy. But here's the thing about lies. They don't hold up under scrutiny. They need silence to thrive. And I wasn't silent anymore. The first domino fell when Belmore Legal's VP of Communications, a woman named Leora, reached out to me directly on LinkedIn. "Abigail, were you responsible for our original messaging framework? It seems it's been replaced, and the current team can't provide any documentation." I replied carefully, "Yes, I built your brand voice guide, compliance copy templates, and your onboarding sequence. Is there a problem?" "They said you left things disorganized. Would you like me to forward the PDFs and analytics reports?" She asked for them that afternoon. And once she saw them, color-coded, data-backed, fully vetted, she knew. "I should have known it wasn't your work that failed," she said on our follow-up call. "It was the absence of it. From there, it unraveled quickly. The style inconsistencies? My files had been deleted. The tone violations? My guides had been replaced with half-finished Notion docs written by interns. The compliance gaps? The junior contributors didn't know the difference between a CTA and a liability clause. One had Googled how to write legally. Within a week, 4 clients demanded to review the original brand strategy materials. 2 of them had archived copies I had personally emailed months before. Another asked if I was available for freelance work off record. Daniel tried to spin it again, said the system was still in transition, that these were temporary hiccups. But when one of the teenage freelancers posted a screenshot of their cadenza assignment on Instagram, complete with a caption that said, "Y'all, I just wrote for a bank and I'm 16, the last thread snapped. By the time I heard from HR, it was almost poetic. Not my HR. Theirs. An anonymous email. "Just so you know, there's an internal investigation now. Daniel tried to pin the compliance failures on your documentation, but the clients are pushing back hard. One even said you were the reason they signed in the first place." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Because in the end, Daniel hadn't just underestimated me. He underestimated truth. He thought he could rewrite the past, erase the systems I built, and plug the holes with trendiness and bravado. But paper lies burn fast under real scrutiny. He thought professionalism was optional. He forgot it's what holds everything together. I poured myself another cup of tea, opened my laptop, checked my new inbox. 3 new inquiries, 2 strategy requests, and 1 from Belmore. "Would you consider coming in as a consultant?" And that's when I knew, you don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you just have to wait for the smoke to clear, and let the facts speak for themselves. The first time I sent a document, I hesitated, not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I knew exactly what it would do. Belmore Legal had asked for a simple confirmation. "Do you have a copy of the messaging strategy your team delivered last September?" But what I gave them was more than that. I emailed them a zipped folder, annotated tone of voice guidelines, the full compliance-adapted copy deck, audience persona breakdowns, and the analytics snapshot from Q4 that showed how click-through rates had nearly doubled after implementation. Within an hour, I had a reply. "We had no idea this level of work had ever existed. None of it was shared with us after the handover. Abigail, thank you. This is beyond clarifying." A second client, an e-commerce brand I'd helped repackage for their global launch, reached out days later. Their new content team had delivered a homepage draft that read like it was written in a dorm room during finals week. The founder messaged me directly on WhatsApp. "Not sure what happened after you left, but it's a mess now. They told us your documentation was lost due to a cloud migration. Was it?" It wasn't. I uploaded everything: the sitemap, the brand voice palette, the product naming logic guide, and even the spreadsheet I'd made to track regional tone adjustments. I'd saved it all, not out of paranoia, but professionalism. The next day, the founder posted this to LinkedIn. Turns out our previous strategist was more than just a writer. She was the entire backbone of our voice. Shame on the agency for pretending otherwise. The dominoes fell fast after that. I hadn't expected it to go public, but it did. Clients talked to each other, and soon they were comparing notes. Literally. I received more emails, more DMs, more quiet pings that all said the same thing. "We didn't know, we're sorry." And then, one of them forwarded me something I hadn't seen. A PDF from Daniel. A fabricated summary of our work together, stripped of all attribution, with a new content team lead listed at the top. A teenager who'd been with the agency for 3 weeks. He'd taken my frameworks, removed my name, and called it his own initiative. That's when things changed. Because now it wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. Clients began to push back. Not with whispers, but contracts. One company's legal department contacted me, asking if I'd be willing to sign a declaration about the authorship of a specific compliance policy I'd created. Another asked if I still had timestamps or emails proving delivery. I did. I had all of it. Not because I was looking for revenge, but because I had done the work, and I had the receipts. That week, Cadenza Marketing received its first formal notice of breach of service agreement. Belmore Legal issued it. A second client followed, citing reputational damage due to misrepresentation of authorship, and then a third. Daniel, from what I heard, tried to downplay it. He told internal teams it was a coordinated backlash from legacy clients. He said I was bitter and emotional, and that I was trying to sabotage their progressive shift. But you can't lie to numbers, or contracts, or dated PDF files. When the clients began forwarding their signed statements, marked with delivery dates and version histories with my initials in the margins, Daniel's narrative started to collapse. Word spread fast. You could feel the panic in the building without even being there. Mia told me HR had called an emergency meeting. Charlotte said the compliance officer sat in the war room with his head in his hands for half an hour. Even Jordan, who had finally quit, sent me a text. He's spiraling. They're talking lawsuits. You might have broken the spell. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt justified. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. We live in a world that undervalues the quiet work, the strategy buried inside spreadsheets, the insight between lines of UX copy, the systems built by people who don't shout, but build. And too often, those people are erased the moment someone louder walks in. But the beauty of real work is this. It leaves a trace. You can fake personality, you can bluff through a pitch, but you can't fake a 46-page tone guide. You can't fake the delta in conversions that happens when someone rewrites a sentence with empathy instead of trend chasing. Daniel tried to erase me with buzzwords and bravado, but facts don't need a spotlight. They just need time. And now, with lawyers watching and contracts unraveling, time was finally on my side. By the end of the month, Cadenza Marketing was no longer the shimmering agency it once pretended to be. It was bleeding. One client left, then 3, then 7. The homepage still showcased pastel-filtered portfolios and buzzwords like disruption and creative acceleration, but the contact form went quiet. Publicly, they maintained the illusion. Privately, panic had set in. What started as a few scattered complaints had snowballed into something far more dangerous. Fines, audits, formal investigations. 3 of their largest clients issued breach of contract claims citing false attribution and regulatory negligence. A healthcare brand flagged unauthorized changes to patient-facing language, changes that risked HIPAA violations. A fintech partner reported potential exposure due to unstable compliance language created by unqualified writers. And when the legal teams started pulling logs and email chains, the holes became canyons. Entire documentation packets had been deleted. Dates didn't line up. The new content strategy Daniel touted in board meetings turned out to be thinly disguised copies of the systems I had built, stripped of attribution and diluted beyond recognition. I didn't have to testify. The documents spoke for themselves. In an ironic twist, it wasn't my voice that tore Daniel down. It was his own lies collapsing under the weight of paper truth. Inside the company, things turned cold. Jordan, who had since joined a startup, texted me updates from the shadows. He's locked himself in his office most days. Everyone's walking on eggshells. HR called an all hands and didn't invite him. Clients are demanding answers in writing now. Nobody wants to be on the phone. Charlotte told me Daniel had stopped attending team meetings entirely. He's not managing anymore. He's defending himself. And Mia. They offered me a 3-month extension to help stabilize the content team. I said no. I'm done fixing messes I didn't make. Daniel tried to blame everyone. Me, his team. Industry resistance to innovation. He called it a smear campaign. He claimed he was misunderstood, ahead of his time. But nobody believed him anymore. The court of public opinion had already spoken. A thread surfaced on Twitter from a client's former brand director, outlining how Cadenza had prioritized trend chasing over truth. It was polite but damning. It included screenshots, timestamps, broken copy, deleted Slack messages. And then a Medium article dropped. Title: When Fast Content Fails, a Cautionary Tale from Inside a Top Marketing Agency. The author had been anonymous, but it didn't need a name. Everyone knew who wrote it. It dissected how Cadenza built a brand around disruption, but hollowed it out from the inside with shortcuts, cheap labor, and contempt for experience. It quoted emails from Daniel. It cited his school children remark. It mentioned me by title, not by name. One strategist created a scalable tone architecture across 11 verticals. Her documentation was later deleted by management and dismissed as too complicated. Her absence revealed just how foundational her work had been. It went viral within hours. Clients reposted it. Copywriters screenshotted it. Even other agencies started referencing it during onboarding, warning new hires about the cost of trend over talent. And Daniel? He was left with no one to blame but himself. The walls he built out of buzzwords and fake innovation came down, fast and merciless. You can't build a foundation out of disdain. You can't sustain success on the backs of people you belittle. Because human labor isn't infinite. It remembers. It responds. And when it rises, it leaves no stone unturned. By the time Cadenza announced its pause in operations due to internal restructuring and strategic realignment, no one even pretended to believe it was temporary. It wasn't a pause. It was a funeral. For a company that could have thrived on talent, but chose to feed on ego instead. It was a rainy Tuesday when Daniel reached out. The message came through my professional inbox. No subject line, just, need to talk, urgent, can call anytime. I didn't answer. Not immediately. I let it sit there, unread, the way you leave a letter from someone you once trusted but no longer owe. He tried again the next day. This time, a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but when I picked up, I heard his voice, cool, tired, a little too rehearsed. "Abigail, glad I caught you." I said nothing. "I've been following the fallout. Obviously, it's gotten out of hand, and I think we both know it doesn't have to end this way." Still, I didn't speak, so he filled the silence. "I want to offer you a contract. Independent, consultant level, significant pay increase, 6 months. You'd work with the legal teams, rebuild the content strategy, re-establish trust with the top-tier clients." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. I finally said, "You want me to fix the mess you created?" He hesitated. "No, I want us to collaborate." "You deleted my work," I said quietly. "You erased my name. Then you told clients I was the problem." "That was never my intention," he replied quickly. "It was strategic communication. We were under pressure." "You lied," I said. "Not just to them, to the entire team." There was a pause. Then his voice softened, like he thought charm might still work. "Look, I was wrong about some things. I see that now. The new hires, they weren't ready. We moved too fast. But what you built was solid. Quiet, but solid. That's what we need right now." "What you need," I said, "is accountability." He didn't like that. I could hear the shift in his breathing. "This is a serious offer," he snapped. "Double your previous rate. Autonomy. You won't answer to anyone. You'd have power, Abigail." That was when I realized something important. He still thought this was about power. He still thought he had some. I closed my eyes for a moment, exhaled, then said, "You think money is the apology?" "Money is practical," he shot back. "No," I said gently. "Money is convenient. This isn't about convenience. It's about dignity. You spent months convincing everyone that what we do doesn't matter, that it could be replaced, that it was fluff. And now that you see the consequences, you want the same people you devalued to fix it for you." "I'm trying to fix it," he said sharply. "You want the results," I replied, "but you don't want the lesson." There was another long silence. Then, more quietly, "Is that a no?" I didn't hesitate. "It's a no? Even for double?" Even for triple. You're passing up a power position. No, I said. I'm defining one. He didn't reply. I ended the call. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something stronger than relief. I felt clean. Because here's what I finally understood. Real power isn't a title. It's not a salary. It's not being asked back when they're desperate. It's being able to say no. It's walking away when your name is only valued after it's been missed. It's knowing your worth doesn't rise and fall with someone else's failure. That night, I opened my laptop and returned to the client strategy deck I was building. Quietly, steadily, my own consultancy was taking shape. No dramatic launch, no press release, just work, real work, built on clarity, not chaos. A week later, I received a message from Charlotte. If you ever need help, I'm ready. I want to do this the right way. And then, one from Mia. If you're hiring, I've got ideas. And a client who's asking about you. It wasn't power in the traditional sense, but it was respect. And that lasts longer. The offer came quietly, without pretense. Not a grand poaching attempt, not a recruiter with buzzwords. Just an email from someone I'd once helped turn around a failing product launch, with nothing but a reworked homepage and a tone of voice pivot. Subject line: Are you ready to do it differently? The agency was small, boutique, focused, no neon signage or performative culture. Their deck was lean but sharp. They didn't brag about vibes. They talked about resonance, about depth, about craft. Their creative director, Alina, had followed the Cadenza collapse from afar. I read between the lines, she said on our call. I've been in this business long enough to know whose fingerprints are really on the work. I joined a month later as senior brand strategist, with autonomy, a say in hiring, and one promise: no disrespect, no shortcuts. Not long after, something remarkable began to happen. One by one, my old clients found me, not through announcements, not through outreach, just through memory. Belmore Legal was the first. Leora called and said, "We don't want the noise anymore. We want clarity. We want you." Then came the skincare brand. Then the e-commerce group. They weren't just following me. They were leaving something behind. Not just Cadenza, but the illusion that speed equals quality, or that trend equals trust. And as more clients came, I found myself needing help. But this time, I got to choose. Charlotte joined first. She'd left Cadenza quietly after the fallout, but her precision hadn't dulled. "I want to do work that doesn't require me to fight for its validity," she said. "I want to spend time making something that doesn't vanish in a Slack thread." Then came Mia. She brought warmth and rigor in equal measure. She rebuilt the editorial process we'd once lost. "It's not just about writing," she told me. "It's about holding the line for what matters." Jordan joined part-time, writing headlines that still made us laugh, but with structure now, intent, weight. We weren't building fast, we were building right. We created an internal document, not because we had to, but because we believed in it. It was titled, "Respect the Craft," a living tone and strategy guide for ourselves. The first line read, "We don't just write. We translate identity into language. It became our compass." We weren't chasing clients. They were coming to us. Not because we were trendy, but because we were consistent. Because they'd felt the absence of strategy dressed up as spontaneity, and now they wanted substance. There were no neon signs in our office, no foosball table, just windows, plants, and silence when we needed it. And a quiet sense of pride that grew every time we delivered work, with our names still attached. People talk about building empires, but I think about something smaller, quieter, a workshop, a studio, a table around which people gather not because they have to, but because they trust each other's instincts. This isn't the kind of story that ends with fireworks. It ends with something better. Work that speaks, clients who stay, and a team that looks at every project like it matters, because it does. I'm not the loudest in the room, I'm not the fastest, but I don't need to be, because I know what I've built, and more importantly, so do the people who matter.